All right, rock star writers, we are in the stage of the drafting where we are going to be actually writing. You're going to be writing your introduction and your conclusion. So the purpose of this video is to give you some examples to walk you through what are the components of the introduction and the components of the conclusion. I'm putting this together in one, even though you might just want the conclusion. You can always skip forward to that because they're very similar. And I always teach my writers to wait until your body is done, your body paragraphs, which you've completed, and then take a look at the introduction and the conclusion. A little bit easier to write because you know where your essay body is going. So in your introduction, you can lead the reader into that. And then the conclusion is similar to the introduction. There's a little bit of some differences. I'm going to show you that, but it's easy to go ahead and write that right after you write your introduction. So let's get into this. I'm going to show you the components, just a real quick review. We've talked about this already, but a real quick review on the four components of an introduction. So number one, you want to think about your grabber. That first sentence of your introduction is a net. Okay. Talked about a hook, but a hook only catches one fish. A net, you're catching as many as you can. So as many readers as possible. You want to catch as many of them right out the gate. And I'm going to show you an example of an introduction here in a minute. And there's tons of introductions and grabbers. There's different kinds of grabbers. You can use a statistic to grab your reader. Sometimes people like facts and figures. You can use a quote. Maybe there's a leading researcher or someone that is an expert in the particular topic that you've selected. You might want to quote them to get your reader excited or thinking about whatever it is that you're arguing. Statement. You could make a provocative statement that gets your reader questioning or even potentially punching some holes in your argument right out of the gate. Again, engagement is engagement, even if it means that your reader disagrees with you, as long as they are willing to continue to track with your argument and read your essay, that's a win. Finally, a question. And in the example I show you today, I'm going to use a question to get the reader thinking about the topic. And in an argumentative essay, specifically, you can use second person language because you are addressing your reader directly. So you can use you, your in your essay. The second component is a topic sentence. Now, if you recall, we've used a funnel to represent how an introduction moves from something very broad to something very specific, because eventually you're landing on your thesis, which contains your claim, and in an argumentative essay, you're presenting your solution or a potential compromise. But before you get there, you've got to sort of warm your reader up, if you will. So think about going into like a spring here in North Central Florida, and the water is very cold. So you kind of ease in. Some of you like to just jump in and shock your body. Some people like to ease in. So you kind of start with your ankles, knees, waist, so forth and so on until you're completely submerged. Think of your introduction as a way of slowly easing your reader into your eventual claim that you'll be making. So the general sentences do that. They sort of ease your reader in gradually. Eventually, you're going to land on specific topic sentences. That reader has to know what this essay is going to be about eventually in the introduction. And then finally mention the thesis, which is the claim. All right, let me show you an example of what that actually looks like. So I'm going to share my desktop here. All right, so we're starting with the thesis, which all of you have already written. So we're going to start with this thesis, which says teens should not be allowed to get tattoos or body piercings since this drastic expression of individuality is a trend which will eventually go out of style, leaving the teens with a permanent mark they may regret later, especially when their body art results in infection or other unforeseen health problems. I'm starting with the thesis because we're going to build down to that narrowest piece of your introduction. So what does that, what would a good lead to that? What would be a good grabber? Well, I'm starting with that question, the question of, have you ever had, and I can use you, second person, have you ever had the urge to express yourself in a unique way? Starting very broad, not mentioning anything about tattoos, not mentioning anything about body piercings. Think about your topic, whatever it may be, driverless cars. Maybe you're writing about the safety of helmets being used in sports and concussions. Maybe you're writing about genetic editing. Think about your topic from a wider perspective. What what umbrella would that topic fit under? So driverless cars would fit under the umbrella of technology. Genetic editing might fit under scientific advancement or control, this idea of controlling our future. So think about a bigger idea and phrase your grabber in addressing that bigger idea. So in this case, tattoos and body piercings fit under the idea of a unique expression. Then from there, I'm going into some general topic sentences. So from clothes to hobbies like art, sports, and music, individuals throughout history have sought out ways in which they can represent their individuality. Think of people like Leonardo da Vinci's famous Mona Lisa painting or one of Beethoven's signature symphonies. Each has a distinctness that reflects the creator. Again, haven't mentioned anything about tattoos or body piercings, just talking about all the different ways, examples of how people express themselves. You see, I'm leading that reader into a narrower idea of where I'm eventually going. And then finally, specifically, today, teens are taking their self-expression to new and dangerous heights by marking themselves in special ways. Skin and cartilage have become the new palettes. See how I did that with art? The new palettes. So instead of a fresco on a wall or a painting on a canvas, these are new palettes that these artists are drawing on. And teenagers are showing off their uniqueness through this art form. Now, I'm calling it an art form in quotation marks because, and I'll get into that if I was writing this as an essay, I'd be getting into more of how are people thinking of tattooing and body piercing as an art form. Probably in my second body paragraph when I'm looking to knock down the opposing claim that it's okay to do this as a teenager. So there's an example of an introduction. We're going to now move into conclusion. All right. So let me go back to my board here, switch to the other side. What are the components of a conclusion? Very similar to an introduction, okay? But reversed, we're actually going narrow first, right? So we're starting at the narrowest point in our first sentence of our conclusion. So you're restating your thesis in a fresh way. You don't want to say it the same way, and I'll show you an example here in a minute. Then you're going to summarize the main supports for your claim. And then finally, the third piece is you want to challenge your reader. What do you want them to think, believe, or do? So think about that when you're writing your conclusion. That last sentence is, what do you want to leave that reader with as a last thought? Maybe it's some sort of a challenge on what they should do. So if you're researching something, if you're writing about genetic editing, maybe you want your audience to rethink going down the route of genetic editing or thinking about what could they do when it comes to genetic editing. You're thinking about that compromise. Driverless cars. Maybe you're okay with driverless cars and you want that reader to consider purchasing a vehicle that they can have, that a driverless vehicle that they could use on the road. Whatever the case may be, you want to leave that reader with a challenge at the end to get them thinking about, what am I going to do now with this essay? What now? So what? Let me show you an example. So let's go back here to the desktop. And let's go to our conclusion example. All right, so we're starting now reverse. We're starting with the first sentence. And look at the ways I've changed this. While some consider tattoos and body piercings a beautiful form of artistic expression, teenagers should be extremely cautious before making such a life-changing decision with their bodies. The repercussions could be serious. That is a different form, a different sentence formation, different word choice. You don't want to regurgitate. You don't want to just swap out a few words with different synonyms. You really want to restructure and rephrase your thesis in a fresh way. All right. Now we're going into restating the supports of my claim. The idea of permanently marking the body with ink or putting a hole in skin may seem like a cool idea in the moment, but teens have to think about what their skin is going to look like when they are much older. Will that tattoo look as stylish when it's indistinguishable, like you don't recognize it? The appearance of the mark could be the least of teens' worries, though. They also should reconsider the health risks like skin infections. All of those things were mentioned in the body. They were mentioned in the previous thesis statement in the introduction that I just shared. You can go back and look at those, but they're restated in a different way, a fresh way. Finally, I'm going to leave that reader with a challenge. If you are a teenager, so I'm very well aware that I'm speaking to teenagers right now. If you are a teenager considering tattoos or piercing, really take some time and think through your decision before you go all in. Remember, you cannot undo a tattoo, and while you can take out an unwanted piercing, the hole has left in your body. The hole that's left in your body may serve as a constant reminder of an impulsive and risky decision. So you see there that challenge. Remember, the challenge is, what do you want the reader to think, believe, or do? That is challenging my teenage audience to rethink before they go through with this potentially risky and impulsive decision. All right. Hopefully that has been helpful to you. Again, you can rewatch this, stop it as you're working on your introduction. Stop before you go into conclusion, or watch the whole thing again if you want to. You can kind of check in with your brain, find out what works best for you. But again, introduction and conclusion, very similar to one another. Hopefully this has helped you, and happy writing.